In a relatively old bio of mine, I describe myself as someone who desires to provide language for the process of life and faith. I'm a words person. Not everyone has to be or is, but I certainly care quite a bit about the words I use and the words that I take into my life. A lot of that came from a book I read a number of years ago by Marilyn Chandler McIntyre. The book is called Caring for Words in a Culture of Lies. And right smack dab in the middle of the book is this notion, as she writes with beautiful words. It says, the business of telling the truth and caring for the words we need for that purpose is more challenging than ever before. Simply the scale on which lies can be and are propagated can be overwhelming. End quote. Because of that urgency, I've moved from just admiring and enjoying poetry to understanding the vital nature of poetry as a gift to and a tool of great, good, and powerful culture. For a number of years, Tanner Olson has been making poetry and putting it in the world. He is also one of those artists who recognizes that the work he does requires a bit of translation. He's not just a poet who puts poems in the world and hopes that people might or might not get them. He actually invites people into his process as a writer because he is actually doing the work of caring for the language he's using and its impact on those that take it in. I've enjoyed watching him from afar. I've enjoyed our growing friendship, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you will too. Where are you right now? You're at home. Where is home?
In Nashville.
You're in Nashville.
Yeah.
Okay. Where in Nashville are you? Are you like downtown? You're in, because people are like, I'm in Nashville, but they mean Franklin.
Oh, no. We are North Nashville. So not East Nashville. I mean, East Nashville is like 10 minutes from us. Franklin's probably like 40 minutes from us.
Okay.
My wife went to Vanderbilt.
Okay.
And she's from Indiana, but went to Vanderbilt and graduated in 2012. And then she hung around here for like 8 years. And then we worked in Texas for a little bit and then just moved back in like, I think August of 2019.
Oh, really?
So, so we haven't been here for too long, but she had her whole community of people was still here. And it was like one of those no-brainer things to move back up this way.
Where are you from though? Like are you? You're not from Nashville?
No, I'm from Orlando. I grew up in a town called Oviedo, which is like 20 minutes outside of Orlando, and then I went to college in Wisconsin, and then kind of bounced around. So Nashville is not home for me either.
No.
But yeah.
But you ended up in Nashville because she was in college, developed a little bit of thing, or you came back. Do you like it there? Do you feel home there?
I don't. I think I would if 2020 had looked different.
Okay, yeah.
Because we landed in 2019, at the end of 2019, and then I started touring like September, October, November, December, and then January and February. Like I was gone for at least 2 weeks every month that we were here. So I didn't really have time to get to know the city, and it was winter, and I mean winter in most states is like pass, let's
because you're from Florida.
It's actually out.
That's good.
Oh man, rough. Yeah, dude. I mean, I worked at a camp in northern Wisconsin too for a couple of years, and like the sun came up at 7:30 and went down at like 4:15 when I lived up there.
Yeah,
it's quite miserable. But so I've gotten to live a lot of different places, but I really like Nashville. Actually, my 2 childhood best friends live here now as well.
Okay.
So it's, so I've got some people, here, but I mean, I still like, I don't feel like this is my city. Not that it would ever be my city, but like, It's not like I've stuck my flag in it, been like, we're here. It's a place you feel like you live for now, but you don't, but there's it sounds like there's kind of a pull somewhere. Yeah, I'm good wherever. I think. Well, wherever. I'm not going back to Wisconsin.
Good wherever except Wisconsin. Okay.
Except Wisconsin.
Is there a place is what you said? It's Oviedo is the name of the town.
Oviedo.
Oviedo.
Yeah, Oviedo.
And
there's a town in some country that's also Oviedo. But my folks and my brother and sister-in-law, they all live down there still. So I'm the only one of my immediate family who escaped.
Huh. Do you feel like that's still home? Like, where would you say, like, when I say home, like emotionally, where does your heart go?
It's Florida, like, for sure.
In general, Florida.
I mean, yes, Florida I think Florida will always be home.
Okay.
But really it's wherever like my wife is, you know?
Oh, wow.
So yeah, cause I've gone home a couple of times without her, and it's been like good to be there, but it was like, oh, something's missing. And then I go home and I go back to where she is, which is home in Nashville. And it's like, oh, I'm home now.
Okay.
So it's like a both and kind of situation.
Yeah.
But she's like, oh, we're not living in Florida. And I understand. I read the news. We're not going back to Florida. We're not.
That's so real.
I love it though. And truly, like, growing up in Florida, I feel like I got a great childhood, because when you live in Orlando, it's probably it's very similar to California too, right? Like, you're surrounded by people from all over the country with all these different backgrounds. And I think Florida has less of less neighborhoods. Whereas cause you're out in California, right? And like, I've been out there a couple of times, and it's like, well, people from this country live here and here and here. In Florida, everyone's just kind of like thrown together, and everyone is basically like, we like warm weather in Disney. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. So
you like the kind of the collision of culture and variation. Are you a crowds person in general? Like, you like being around the crowds? And
I don't know. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It kind of depends on what are we crowding around, or what are we crowded for.
Okay. Yeah.
So if it's like, if we're at a concert, depends on who's playing, but for the most part, yeah. But I think even just with this past year, I've really enjoyed not being around large groups of people.
Really?
And I kind of wonder, like, how many other people are going to come out of this and be like, yeah, and I'll just watch it at home, you know, or I'm interested to kind of see how the world shakes out when everything kind of plays out. But
yeah, right.
I used to be a big crowds person, love being around people, and now and I think maybe it's because after like touring and going or being around a bunch of people and then being exhausted because of that, maybe that's changed some things for me. But yeah, it kind of depends on what we're crowding around. Like, if we're going to a basketball game, I don't care how many people are there. I want to go watch.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Talk about the touring bit for a moment here. You've gone out a few times, you've been on the road, you've done some traveling. Are you usually by yourself when you travel? Talk a little bit about like kind of like your touring protocol. And then, like, do you like the road? Do you like travel? Do you like performance? Like, you know, as a poet, I mean, your whole thing is like, it's written to speak. And so there is this like interactive thing. There's like, but do you enjoy that part of it? Like talk about the whole thing, from like traveling to being in the room with people to the hotel. To like, do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you like parts of it? Talk about it.
I think the answer is yes. I love it. Like, I don't necessarily love being away from my wife and our friends in Nashville, but I do love getting to, whether it's a church or a school or an organization, and sharing poetry and the things that I've written with people. And more often than not, the shows that I've done there, it's kind of a combination of like me sharing poetry, me telling stories, and then me doing stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
But I don't say that I do stand-up comedy, because that's just like that's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot.
I'm not ready to call myself a comedian yet.
No.
But when people say like, yeah, I'm not there. I'm not, maybe one day. But when I do a show, people walk away saying, you know, hey, I didn't know what to expect, but it wasn't that, but I loved it.
Yeah.
And because people have this, like, I think a very narrow view of what poetry is.
Yes.
And like they fit a poet into a box. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I fit that box. At least I hope not. Not that there's anything wrong with that box. That's not the box where I call home. But I love touring. And for me, it's looked a couple of different ways. Usually it'd be like 4 or 5 days out, and I'll like rent a car and then drive everything. and stay in hotels or on the floors of my friends' houses or really wherever I can find a place. It's not glamorous by any means. But when you truly believe in something, you'll do whatever to see that through. And I truly believe that there is something powerful about sharing words of hope and communicating stories that are personal, but also can be held in the hands of another person, and then they understand it as well.
Huh.
I think that answers your question. I do enjoy the touring part. I enjoy the sharing, but the sharing is exhausting and it is draining. But after I'm home from a tour, I feel like I've done something. I feel like I did something, and I wasn't just writing at home and putting it on the internet. Yeah. Although I love that part as well.
Yeah. But it's a different interaction, specifically with words, is to be in a room with folks to like your thing, like to say it aloud, to actually speak it. Yeah. It's a different. And to some degree, and we'll get to this, like what it's like to live online, but to be in a room with people as a poet provides a particular kind of connection point. Do you find that, like, for you, do you end up leaving a tour date understanding, seeing, feeling differently about your own work? Do you walk out and be like, oh my gosh, I hate that piece? Or like, oh, I really fell in love with that piece. Like, does it change the nature of your relationship with your own work?
Yes. And I don't think I would be touring if I hadn't had that experience. Yeah. Okay. If the words that I've written didn't mean so much to me that I thought that other people needed to hear them as well. And that I've always wrestled with that, with like the words that I write and wanting to call them good. Because I don't necessarily see myself as like this great writer, but if anything, I'm a really great feeler. Like I just feel a lot of things and I'm able to put those feelings into words. And I think that when you're able to communicate those feelings or those emotions or those questions or wonderings, it's going to help other people break through the own walls that they've kind of built up or the things that they're struggling through. And so when I'm sharing poetry face to face with people, and then really it's what's happening while I'm doing it and then afterwards. Yeah. Like when you see, I did a show down in Houston one time, and there was a guy who sat in the back with his arms crossed the entire time. Like his body language is like looking at me. And he was like you knew this guy like either drove trucks across the country or did things with oil. Like we're in Houston. This is what like, and he just sat there, stared at me the whole time, and like, and I was just like, this guy hates me. Like he probably like, this is my last show ever because I'm not making it out of here live. He's the last person to leave the venue. He comes up to me afterwards and with like tears in his eyes goes, I needed that.
Oh, that's so good.
And I was like, oh. He's like, you wouldn't think so. And I was like, honestly, I didn't think so at all, because this is the way that you look the entire time. And I like mimicked him back to himself. And he was like, yeah, that's just how I am. I get that. I understand. But it's moments like that in the stories that you hear after shows, or just seeing like somebody like nod their head like constantly while you read or while you share something. It's that approval, but it's not just approval. It's, hey, what you're saying is hitting me in a place that nothing has before. Yeah. Or has for a while. And that's kind of why I started doing this whole poetry thing, is I just wanted to help people. And this is the way that I feel like I can do that the best.
So those moments with, when someone comes and says something along those lines, those are fantastic moments. Like, oh, I needed that. Part of the trick with art in general, but definitely a trick with poetry, there is a bit that has to do with interpretation. So when I let go of something into the world as an artist, regardless of what it is, I kind of let go of the control I have over it. Like I put words in someone's life. I, to some degree at least, mean a certain thing by the set of words, by the particular words. But as soon as I let it go, and it's online, or it's in the mic, it's in the speakers, and then it gets into someone's head. They do something else with it almost every time. Like this, like words. I'll do a thing on the podcast oftentimes with guests. So like I'll kind of run down a list of words and be like, hey, I'm just going to put this word on the table. You tell me what you think it means, or tell me like what it does in you. And I'll say things like, blackness or whiteness or femininity. And depending on who I'm talking to, there's not fundamental shifts, but it can be a pretty broad spectrum of like, oh, this is what this is for me. As a poet, you're spending really particular time on a set of words, and then you let them go, and someone else is going to do something in their own heart and mind with those words. Can you talk about that interaction where and sometimes it's a matter of like, someone spits something back at you and you're like, that's what was in my heart when I wrote it. And sometimes someone's like, hey, I think, this poem, like this does this thing with me and my mom. And you're like, this has nothing to do with motherhood. Mm-hmm. Or my kids, or like, yeah, this took me all the way back to high school. And you're like, why? Can you talk about that letting go process of like, okay, yeah, how, whatever it does in your life, do you have are there boundaries there for you? Or like, hey, I don't want you to think that way. Just talk about like that letting go bit.
Yeah, I think you're dead on. One of the first poems that I ever wrote, it's a poem called Dear You. And it was it's this poem where it's like, it basically starts out by saying, I wrote this for you. And I even have that in the very first page of the first book that I released. It was, I wrote this for you. And just like that for me is this reminder that I wrote it for them, and they're going to do whatever they want to with these words, whether they're going to like them, understand them, connect with them, dismiss them, like whatever it may be. But they are now their words. And the words that I've written, they might open doors, or it might shut them. Hopefully it opens up doors. But there have been some things that I've written where somebody sent me a message and say, hey, like, this is what this poem means for me or did to me. And my response is always, well, tell me more about that. Because for me, like the poem that I wrote about, whatever it may be, was probably pretty far off from what they said. I don't have any like clear examples right now, but oftentimes somebody will say, hey, when you read this, or when you said this line, this is where I went. And sometimes they'll even come back with, and I'm sure you felt this as well, maybe they'll come back with a question and say, why did you say this? Or why did you say it in this way? Yeah. And it's really helpful for me because it kind of like challenges what I've written. Yeah. And even some of my earlier stuff where looking back, in what I know now, I would have written it differently. But sometimes the answer is, well, I was 22 when I wrote that, and I'm not 22 anymore. But this is what it meant then to me. Yeah. And that's why I kept it in the book, or that's why I share it every other night, or whatever it may be. Yeah. But it is always beautiful to write something and for somebody to take that and then make it their own. And I think that's just a beautiful way of like navigating the world with art. Because there are some pieces of other artists that I really love, or even just like songs, right? Like my favorite band is Newfound Glory. They're from Florida as well, just so we have it. But I'm growing up, I loved, and I still love Newfound Glory, and they still put out music 20 years later. It's amazing. But the things that they've written have connected with me so deeply. And then when I go to a show and they say something like, yeah, we wrote this song because this, and this, I'm like, does that change it for me, or does it not? And most of the time it's like, nope, it doesn't change it for me, because this is what their art means to me and means for me. So
that's good.
Yeah.
And in your context as well, I mean, some of what you deal with has to do with religious faith, with religious culture, with, at times you're pretty intentionally trying to take what folks are, what you think people might be wrestling with or dealing with in terms of their religious faith or their practice, and trying to help steer or maybe rearrange or kind of give some altitude. Playing around with, or experimenting with, or working in language in the context of religion can be just flat out dangerous and weird and troublemaking. Do you feel a responsibility to, because it's how should I say this? There's like the responsibility a person feels towards an audience. So we're going to have a little bit of that conversation, but then in your context, there's potentially this responsibility you have to like a religious tradition or your religious tradition or someone else's religious tradition. Can you talk about navigating that a little bit? Because like, does it put restrictions on things for you? Do you feel like, oh, I don't want to cross these lines, or is there like a specter of like, I don't want to get into this space? Talk about the role of responsibility, leadership, religion as a poet trying to connect with and guide people.
Yeah, I certainly do feel a responsibility to help those who believe similar things to what I believe, to help lead them and help them navigate the questions and the just the weirdness of being alive and everything. I should preface it, like everything is touchy, especially in the world that we live in now. Like everything that you say, someone can twist your words or come at you from this angle or that angle or whatever it may be. And so when I write, really what I want to do is I want to help people navigate the questions that they have, or even the faith that they either once were clinging to or continue to cling to. Yeah. So a lot of my writing kind of comes out of that place of wrestling, wondering, uncertainty, like just having a bunch of questions and knowing something deep down, but not knowing how to believe that in the hardship or in the fear or whatever it may be. I wouldn't say that I'm a writer who likes to push boundaries. That's not my style. And plus I am not good at conflict. Just not good at it.
As a person, so just in general, like you don't want it. As a human
being, yeah. Okay. Conflict is not really my thing. Trying to get better at it, but also I don't want to. Anyways, so when I write, what I really want to do is I want to help rather than hinder, and I don't want to be some sort of stumbling block for somebody else, or to write something that gets them confused or riled up. And I'm not even sure I'm capable of writing those things, because I'm just kind of taking the questions that I have and the wondering that I have and the faith that I have in writing it with my belief in who Jesus says he is and that there is hope for the world, and writing out of that belief. So I'm not sure that the things that I write are going to create a division or become something for somebody else that's going to hinder them from taking a step forward. Yeah. Now I'll have those conversations, but I'm not necessarily sure it's going to show up in the things that I've written. And if it has, it's kind of been from a place of me questioning what I believe. Does that make any sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like you're not trying to stir conflict. You're not trying to like shake anybody up. You're trying to, meet folks where they're at, but like, you're not looking for conflict. And that's part of, I think what I'm hearing you say is like part of how you want to be responsible to your tradition or someone else's religious tradition is like, you're not trying to shake someone out of their worldview. You're trying to find the sort of the softer spots and be like, hey, you're okay where you are.
Exactly. And maybe I struggle with seeing myself as a teacher or a leader, but I don't struggle with seeing myself as a believer and somebody who's good at wrestling with questions openly and seeing how that is important and that matters. And that doesn't mean that you don't have faith. That just means that you have some questions right now, and it's okay to ask those. And so if I can be an example of somebody who openly wrestles with the truth that I believe, then that'll put somebody else in a position to perhaps do the same, because I think that's a healthy thing to do. Yeah. I think it's a healthy thing to ask questions. I think it's a healthy thing to say, I don't know, or I believe, help my unbelief. And if I can be somebody who comes alongside you with that, and this is what your writing has done for me as well, is it kind of comes beside my questions and it says, hey, that's okay to ask. Here's something that I have learned. And I want to also be somebody who says, hey, this is what I've learned. Not calling myself a teacher, just saying I'm a student as well. Especially when you put a lot of stuff on the internet, people are going to start seeing you as somebody who has answers. And I would say that I have more questions than answers, but I'm going to keep asking them because I know at least a few answers.
If you've been around the podcast for any amount of time, you know that I ask almost all my guests about their experience of life online. Part of why I do that is because I'm in a lot of conversations about the impact that online life has on our happiness. We look around at people in our similar stations of life and wonder why we are not there. And that can cause a bit of dysmorphia a sense of displacement from the life we're actually living. And maybe you're like a lot of folks who are struggling with that, or maybe you're just facing depression, or you're stressed, you're anxious. Maybe you got some trauma you don't know what to do with. BetterHelp is actually available right now to you, and it is more affordable than offline counseling. In fact, if you jump right now to betterhelp.com/@sea, that's ATSEA, they'll give you 10% off your first month just because I sent you. That's not a ploy. That's them and me taking your mental health seriously. Jump to betterhelp.com/@sea. That's ATSEA. There's a traditional scriptural warning of like, hey, don't go calling yourself a teacher. Like, don't just go out there and be like, yeah, I'm a teacher, I'm a leader, I'm a specific in terms of religion. Like, yeah, I'm a religious leader. And you mentioned like the particular cultural climate you and I function in, and anyone over the age of 19, hell, anyone over the age of 16 is like, well, I'm an influencer. And you're like, which is like, well, yeah. And the thing is like, well,
sure.
On one hand, it's like, well, yeah, of course you are, because anything you do, like people are watching you. So there's something that's true about that. But then there's like the authority part of it. That's like, okay, you're intentionally leading people, you're intentionally influencing in what direction. And so this, I guess, trepidation of like, I don't want to call myself a leader. There's something that comes with like, I know where I'm goingness. Like when we start talking about leadership, that there is a wisdom to saying, I'm meeting you where you are, and I'm sharing and I'm guiding, but to take my hands off of the like, listen, I've got us headed in the right direction. Trust me, we've got this kind of a thing. There's right. Something he said, like there is a line there was like, I don't want you to call me a leader quite yet. That maybe comes with some age and some time and some failure. That like for a time, right. Be public, by all means, be public, but be humble as well. Like say, this is what I'm thinking, but don't say I'm right about it until you've been wrong enough to know the difference.
Well, and I've been somebody who in the past have been like, I'm a leader. Right. Like I've held positions where I was looked to and I was called the leader of this group. And there have been times where, I look back and I was like, man, you were not ready for that at all. And there's had to have been some sort of hurt between relationships that have happened in those instances as well. And I've also been led by people who called themselves leaders and who constantly talked about leadership and tweeted leadership quotes. And I did not want to follow them. Yeah. Because all they did was talk about leadership, and that's just not where I'm at, and that's not the person that I am right now. But like you said, it's humility. Yeah. Like I want to step forward with humility, and I want to lead with humility, and I want to learn as a humble human being. Because I think that's that's the key. I've listened to a couple of podcasts from former or current NBA player JJ Redick, and he often asks people on his podcast. He says, what's one characteristic of a leader that you respect or want to have? And the answer that always sticks out is it's humility. And so right now for me, like I'm in this, like I want to learn how to be more humble as a human being, and I know that there's a lot that I don't know. And I know there's a lot of questions that I'm asking, but I also think that leadership is going to look pretty different for this next generation moving forward. Yeah. And just on the record, I'm not an influencer. I am not.
No, I'm taking my name out of that hat.
No thanks.
Living online, being you spend a lot of time, you post to Instagram and you post to some degree to Facebook. And I don't know how active you are on Twitter. I don't know. Are you a Twitter person? Do you avoid that mess over there?
I love Twitter.
Do you love Twitter? Okay, good.
So here's my experience with Twitter. I don't do a lot on Twitter, although one time I did have a viral tweet. So I have reached the pinnacle of Twitter.
Okay, did it have anything to do with Taylor Swift? Because that's how you get that done. Just so you know, like you want to get a tweet moving, you got to involve Taylor.
I called a woman a monster, but here's the situation: she threw away the center of a cinnamon roll. And so I tweeted that I just witnessed somebody throw away the center of a cinnamon roll, like the best part of it. And I was at a coffee shop and I, it's like this woman just threw away a center, like she's a monster. Right. And then I checked my phone like an hour later and it was just blowing up. And I've never done anything as good as that. And like, why couldn't it have been something that I really cared about that went viral?
Because that's like never how that works.
Or my book.
Right.
Why?
No.
But no, it's a bad look for, and this is why I'm not a leader. I called a woman a monster and you just shouldn't do that.
That's exactly right. Yes, absolutely. You would have had it revoked anyways.
Yeah. I have been introduced at shows though, as the cinnamon roll guy, which I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
No, I really enjoy Twitter. But most of my work and interactions do take place on Instagram and Facebook. And it's a fascinating space and time to be somebody who puts things on the internet.
Yeah.
And to kind of navigate that.
Are you happy there? Do you like living online? Is it, because for some folks, and not that there's like a spectrum, well, I guess there's something, it's not all that broad a spectrum in all honesty, is like, so for some folks, it's like I'm online because I have to be because of my job or because of this, or I'm online and I want to see my friends, but I hate all the this and the other. This, like, it's not a broad spectrum, but there's a spectrum of folks who are like, I like it, I love it, and I'm kind of okay with it. Like, do you love being there? Do you feel connected? That's one. So the first part is like, do you like being online? And then secondly, do you experience that as a real place? Do you find like the relationships you have and the interactions you have, do they feel real to you? Are they real to you? Talk about being online.
Yeah. I like being online as written to speak. So written to speak is what I created 7 or 8 years ago. And it's me, but it's like a different name. I always put it in terms of like, do you know the band Dashboard Confessional?
Oh, yeah.
Right. It's just like one guy, but he's like, we're Dashboard Confessional. And he has like other guys who play with him, but he's still just one person.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what written to speak is for me. And so I have different accounts. I have personal accounts and then a written to speak account as well. And I really enjoy the interactions that I get through written to speak. It is difficult to be on personal accounts these days, just because everything just doesn't it almost feels real. But it also is like, I would much rather have a conversation with you or call you on the phone than keep up with like friends who were in my botany class in college.
Okay.
Right. Like,
yeah, it's okay.
But like, I still love to see it, but I also just would rather talk to you on the phone and catch up with you in that way. But I've had I would say some meaningful conversations and interactions with people because of my poetry account, because of written to speak and the work that I do there. I've had conversations with people from all across the country who have stumbled upon my work and used it in various ways. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. And I get, messages every day about something that either I wrote that meant something for them, or somebody shared it with somebody else, or a lot of it has to do with mental health and, receiving messages like, I read this poem the other day and I was going to kill myself, but I'm going to stay for another day. And so when you get messages like that, like, how can I not wake up the next day and want to keep doing it? And how does that not mean something to me and to other people? So I do like, especially since touring has been taken away from me this year, and maybe in the future as well, I'm not sure. But building those relationships and getting to hear the stories of other people and to talk with them. And, it's always funny. And I bet you get these messages too, where it starts off with, I doubt you'll ever see this. And it's like, no, I saw it like 10 minutes after you sent it. And, but I'm going to wait like 30 more minutes before I respond to you. But like getting those messages and then being able to respond to people and to acknowledge, like, to say like, no, I hear you, I see you, and I'm going to ask you some questions about the thing that you sent me. And to show people that just because you have some sort of followership or on the internet, that doesn't mean that you're any different from anybody else. Like, don't let that separate you. Like, or just because you think this person is an influencer or whatever name you want to call them, we're all just people. We're all just asking questions, and we all just want people to see us, That's good. And so when I'm, I really do enjoy the aspect of being online with written to speak. But is the internet real? It most certainly is real. but it's exhausting. And so I try not to spend as much time on there as I have in the past. But I mean, you know, when your job is on the internet, like that's where you have to be, but you also have to be able to put up these boundaries and these limits for yourself as well.
So talk about putting a book together. So the other end of the spectrum from posting stuff online where, you know, from the standpoint of like material, like actual physical material connection, words, face to face, have a particular thing. There's kind of there's a thing there. There's like a human interaction that's more about like being in the room with people. Posting something online, there's a kind of gap. You put words in a book. There's something about the book, right? And I'll coach clients pretty regularly. They're like, yeah, I want to write a book. And I'm trying to move people away from putting things in books as often because like it's a particular thing. Like you have to know, I would suggest you have to know what it is you really want with, like, if you're going to make a book, know why. Don't just do it because you're just generally supposed to, because it's a freaking mess and it's weird and it's hard. Talk about like, why put, you know, you've got a crap ton of followers online. If you post, when you post a poem, you've got like 40 or 50,000 people paying attention to it at Instagram alone, which, like, you know, the average book sells like 200 copies or some crap. Like, it's not like, you know what I mean? So you touch more people online. Why make a book? For you, what was the point of putting together? Because this is your second book now, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you've done two books. Why? Like, what's the point of it for you?
First of all, I love seeing completed projects, and I love setting goals and then crossing them off. Like, that's part of it. But also after having done shows and gotten to speak at places, people would say, well, where can I read these? Where can I read your poems? And I didn't have them anywhere. Like, I had them like maybe in old blog posts and, scattered throughout Instagram, but there was not like a place where you could just sit down and read through them. And so, and then I had a friend approach me and say, hey, man, like, I'm putting together a publishing company. Do you want to do a book? And I was like, yeah, like I do. And it was always a dream of mine to put something out and to have a book out for the world to hold and to see. And I just think that there's something beautiful about not being on your phone, like not looking at a screen and reading words. And I think especially with poetry. And so, like, my first book has a bunch of like long form poems inside of it, but the book that I just released is called As You Go, and it's, I mean, most of the page is white, but with like, you know, anywhere from like 10 to 70 words on a page. But just to be able to sit with those words and to reflect on them, or to meditate on them, or to pray them, like I think it's hopeful, and I think that it matters. And I've always been truthfully, I love the internet. And I love technology, but there's just something about getting away from the things that we're always on and spending time with a different medium, or just time away from the noise. And I think that poetry does a great thing of kind of helping people escape and to help them remind and remember the things that they believe, or to help them take that next step to the person that they're becoming. And so there's a lot of reasons why I wanted to write a book, but I've also seen how people have responded to it. And it's kind of the same way, like I said earlier, with just my poetry in general, is I wouldn't go around sharing it if it didn't mean something to somebody else. And so I wouldn't put it in a book if somebody didn't say, hey, can you put that in a book for us to read or for us to sit with? And I wanted, and the other thing is I get to visit, I have a lot of answers. This is a great question. When you have like 13 answers for one question.
Yeah, I'm loving this. This is fantastic.
But you also know that you're terrible at answering questions if you have 13 answers for one question.
or maybe great. Who knows? We'll let the people decide.
But maybe not. I don't want to create any conflict here. But going into schools is something that I love to go visit classrooms and to share poetry with kids. And one of the things that I get to do is I get to hold up a book in front of them, and then they come up to me afterwards and they say, I want to do that. And I would say, well, you can do it. And then I give them a copy of the book and say, hey, you can do this. You can write your own book. I mean, it's not like if I can do it, you can do it as well. When I was younger, I always thought that if only like a select few people could release a book.
Yeah.
But not anymore.
Yeah.
Like anybody can release a book, which doesn't mean that you should, but like maybe you've written something great that needs to be shared with the world, or maybe you just have a dream of sharing a book too. So I like to give people my book and say, well, you can do it as well. Right? Like it is a dream worth achieving. Like you are capable of doing this. And so I want to spread that around with as many kids as possible, because I don't think that I'm the best writer by any means. I think I'm fine, decent. But I know that there are third graders out there who are much better writers than I'll ever be. And they just need to see another writer or another poet see that in them. And that's why I do it.
That's good. Give me a little breakdown of your actual process. So, insofar as you do, you'll speak with kids in third grade, kids in seventh grade. Like a lot of your base are folks who are in their 20s and early 30s. People are paying attention on Instagram. They're folks who are sort of like younger, maybe early career, maybe beginning of second career. Maybe they've lost their first job and they're trying to figure stuff out. And they're like, yeah, I'm thinking about poetry. I'm thinking about. So the notion of like a creative practice, it's always a mystery for folks, right? It's always like this: how do you get from X to Y? How do you get from A to Z? How do you make the thing? And then, so because there isn't an answer to that, like there is no creative process in the macro. There's no like, this is how people get things done. What's it look like for you? Like, do you keep things in a journal? Do you capture? Do you finish things top to bottom? Is it always random? Because I don't think that's almost ever true. Once in a while, it's like, I don't have any kind of creative process. It just shows up. For you, there's a pretty, not standardized, but it's a recognizable structure to what you end up making manifest in the world. How does that end up there? Does it start in a journal? Does it start? Do you keep like 6 or 7 ideas floating at the same time? Take me from zero to published piece.
Yeah. Well, by published piece, do you mean just like a poem on Instagram? Or...
Yeah. To me, it's all publishing. That's what I was saying earlier. It's like if you push something to Instagram, which you did this morning, like if you push stuff to Instagram, to me, that's publishing. Every single inch that putting a book in the world is, it's just a different form of publishing. Once I put something else in someone's life, I've not published.
Mm-hmm. Well, to put things on Instagram, and that's it's always funny when people are like, wait, you also do spoken word poetry? Wait, you also do this? And it's like, yeah, we like creative people do a lot of different things. You just may only see one or two of those things, online. But for me to put something on Instagram, I usually spend like the first 30, 45 minutes of a day just kind of putting words down on a Word document. I wish I was somebody who was like, I have a journal and I write in that journal every single day. And I've had those seasons where I do that. But right now it's like I open up a Word document and I just let things fly. And then I'll go back and reread it. I hardly ever edit while I write. I mostly just write. And then when I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. And then I go through and edit. And then to make it onto Instagram, it's just like, I just pull out a line or two that I like, or maybe it's in the editing process where I take, this paragraph and whittle it down to 10 words. And so that's really how it's gone the last couple of years. Or I'll be sitting at church or listening to music and somebody will say something and I'll be like, and then it'll take my mind to this place and I'll just jot it down in my notes on my phone. So that's kind of been my process over the last year or so. But even like before all that, I would just write as much as I could and then kind of see what comes out of it. There've been a couple of poems that I've written that have turned into 4 or 5 different poems. Yeah. And then there's been 4 or 5 different poems that have turned into just one poem as well. So it's a lot of just like sitting with the words and kind of seeing where are they taking you, or what story do you want to tell, or, what message do you want to communicate? So yeah, there's a lot of different processes that I have, but mostly for Instagram, it's just, all right, I'm just going to sit down for a little while. And then, if you look at my feed, it's like, oh, you have like, your poems are like, 10 words or whatever it may be. And I really enjoy the simple, straightforward. Plus, I am really bad at grammar and punctuation. So like, it's just very simple.
Yes.
So it's just like, I'm gonna put these, and then you read them however you want to.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't want to cause conflict, and I don't want you to be like, well, actually the comma doesn't go there. So I don't put commas in.
Yeah.
You know what? It's my life. I'm going to do what I want with it. Okay?
That's right. Talk about, so where do things live until they're, quote unquote done? Are you using an app? You write with a pencil, you write with a pen? Like, where do things hang out while they're in process?
It's either Google Notes or just like random sheets of paper, right? Like I have something next to me that says poems to finish. And there is about 12 that I have started, and they're all Word documents, and I'll go back through and I'll just write a little bit each time, and I'll put in, it's basically like I'll run a sprint through the poem and add what I can, and then be like, all right, I'll come back to it maybe again tomorrow.
Oh,
or
really?
If I get really fixated on it, then I'll just stick with that one for a little while. But usually for me, I don't know. Nobody really knows how their brain works, right? Or maybe they do. I just don't understand how mine works. But I'm good at going here, 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 and this just as much as possible. And so I'm taking little steps with each project every day. And then some days it might finish or it might be erased. You never know. So I'm constantly working on just too many different things. But I enjoy that part of this job.
Down the line. So you've been at this how long now?
So I started Written to Speak in 2013.
Yeah.
It's my first year out of college, and I started it, and it's changed drastically since the beginning. And truly only in the last about two years I've had, I guess, what you would call success, where I've been able, like in August of 2019, this became my full-time job. But it took, 6 years to get to that point.
Yeah. Give me, in your mind, if things play out for you, if things work, like your plans, touring, books, what does life look like for you 15 years from now? If things work out the way you want them to, you're writing poems. Are you traveling? Are you like, what is it that you're wanting to see? If it could work the way you wanted it to, if it worked exactly the way you wanted to, what's happening 15 years from now for you?
Now that's a good question. I mean, all the other ones have been good too, but I don't have an answer for this. I would say more of the same thing.
Okay. Good.
Truly, I love what I get to do right now. I love, communicating and interacting with people on the internet and face-to-face as well. I love putting out books, but I also really love coming alongside other artists and creatives and encouraging them and helping them in the ways that I can. So I think in 15 years from now, I'd love to, and I don't necessarily love the word consulting, but I would like to be some sort of consultant for other artists and creatives and communicators of how to get their message across and how to spread hope in the way that only they can do it. I would really, I've thought about this too. Like in 15 years, I'll be 47. Math's hard, but I think I just did it.
Yeah.
I'll be 46, 47 years old. And I don't know how many people are going to want a 47-year-old poet to be visiting their fourth grade class and sharing poems. Now, maybe, I don't know, that maybe that's just my own insecurity thinking that through. Because I would love to do that. I don't know. I see myself encouraging, and I see myself still asking questions. And I hope to be able to be working alongside more creatives and more artists to put, whether it's kids' books out or albums of poetry out or whatever it may be, but just ways that I can spread hope in the only way that I know how, which right now it's poetry. That's
good. Well, man, thank you so much for your time. Yeah. I mean it. I'm really glad we got to connect, and I love seeing your stuff online. I like your posture. I like the way you approach folks. That's where we started. Was like, hey, I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm not trying to push you in a particular direction. Like, I like you meet folks. Your angle is like, this is where people are living. This is what you're seeing going on with folks. And you're like, hey, I live in this place too. I resonate with that as well. And I like that you write things that are really clearly angled to find those soft spots and say, it's okay to be here. And there's a next step for you. You don't even have to know what it is. It's hopeful without being like 1987 Hallmark, because Hallmark's gotten way better. We make fun of Hallmark, but they're really good now. But like 1987 Hallmark was trash because it was just so like, it's gonna be fine, everything's glorious, and it wasn't. Like, and you don't do the everything's glorious thing, but you do provide a kind of cautious, slow hope for folks in your work, and I really appreciate that you do it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That truly means a lot. And I mean, I said this earlier, but I truly am a big fan of your work. But since this is your podcast, I'm not going to go on and on about how great and wonderful you are, because I know it just gets kind of awkward. But I hope you know, truly, like, I look forward to reading what you write, and what you write means a great deal to me.
Oh man, that hits in the right spot, dude. Thanks a ton. And thank you for joining me for this episode of the At Sea podcast. If you would like to follow up with Tanner Olson, read his books, buy his books, read more of his work, or join his Patreon, you can jump to writtentospeak.com. If you'd like to be part of the team of the folks who are making this podcast, the At Sea podcast with Justin McRoberts, happen, jump to patreon.com/Justin McRoberts and join our team. We would love to have you. A lot of what we've got planned next will be, in my estimation, the best and most exciting work this podcast has seen. We'd love to have you on the team. Until next time.